What's going on, drivers? Today I'm going to be showing you the assembly of our F250 conversion kit for the Big Country toys on the SCX24. Now to start, a couple things you'll need to know is all of my links here are 3D printed in blue. How the kit currently comes is just with these rear links and it's only selected in black. I will be adding a full set of blue links to the shop soon so that you can have the full color match as an upgraded option. Now how this front end works is simply just the front half of a Gladiator. Then the rear half is all part of the extension. So when you're assembling your truck, if you're starting with a Gladiator already, go ahead and just disassemble everything from the middle of the skid plate back. Now I'm going to go ahead and work on taking my truck all the way apart, so it's about at the same stage that yours should be when starting this build. Okay, so starting off with the kit, the first thing we're going to go over is our front mounts. This piece here is our magnet mount, which will ultimately be the piece that mounts the hood of the vehicle to the actual chassis. Then we have these two pieces, which are our shock towers that mount to the bottom of our magnet mount, which will then also connect to the last piece, which is our battery mount. As always, it's good practice to pre-thread any of your holes before trying to assemble any of the parts together themselves. Keep in mind that this is still a plastic, so if you try to force something, the resistance is going to outweigh the plastic. That being said, let's go ahead and get started by taking our two shock tower mounts and bolting them to our magnet mount. First, we'll look at the bottom of our shock tower mount here, and you'll see a squared end and a round end. That round end is what's going to actually mount to our battery tray here. So we'll want to carry the round end towards the back of the magnet mount, with the lip of the shock tower going to the inside of the mount. Then one screw is going to come in from the top going down, and the other one's going to come from the bottom going up. For this, we can get away with using these really short screws. With our shock towers mounted to our magnet mount, we can then take our battery tray. On the bottom, you'll see a piece that sticks out and a piece that's on the inside. You're going to be mounting it to that piece on the inside. Go ahead and align those holes with the rounded end here, and then screw this together. Now, if you're assembling your kit also with aftermarket hardware like I am, for this section, you're going to specifically want to use the rounded head screws that are typically with your stock assembly. This is because this section is going to be hiding behind the rail, so we'll want to have as little protrusion as possible. Now we have our front magnet and shock assembly together. Like I said in the beginning, the front half of this is going to be a stock Gladiator essentially, minus a shock and magnet mount. So with that, you should be able to go ahead and already have this whole part of the chassis built up with your shocks, front axle, front links, but you can have your ESC off to the side for now. Mine's just partially zip tied, so I'm gonna leave it to the chassis. We can now just take our front magnet mount assembly and kind of slide and wedge this between our chassis rail. And as we get to the back, this section here is essentially gonna be bending down and angled aligned with the hole on the side of the chassis rail up here. Now typically you can simply just slide this right over like so. However, since I already have my servo zip tied and wired in, I'm gonna unbolt this little screw here, wrap my servo wire through there, and then continue with the sliding on process. Then just like normal, go ahead and just bolt this to the chassis using the holes already in the chassis rail. And then lastly, with the front assembly, we can go ahead and mount our shocks to the shock tower. And now we have the front assembly all finished up, and we can move on to the rear half of the chassis. Now again, I already have my ESC and some of my wiring zip tied to my chassis rail, so I'm gonna go ahead and leave that kind of where it's at. Otherwise, your chassis should kind of look empty back here. What we're gonna do is take our chassis extension and slide it between our two rails back here, and then again, using the holes already pre-drilled on our chassis rail, we'll go ahead and bolt this to our chassis. I've gone ahead and added some double-sided tape again to the bottom of my ESC. Okay, now coming to the bottom of our chassis, I'm going to now take our rear axle assembly and mount our shocks up to our shock tower. Now we can go ahead and mount our links up to the vehicle just like normal. If you're using a link riser, the upper links, you're going to want to make sure that you have the bend going upward so that it also clears into this little raised section. And then finally, the last little detail about the drive shaft in the rear is you'll need another set of Gladiator drive shafts because you'll want both female ends of the drive shaft for the rear. But to assemble our drive shaft, we're gonna need to have one of these shafts apart. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove the rear off the axle. Go ahead and take your middle drive shaft adapter, slide it all the way into your drive shaft, and then we can go ahead and make sure that we have our drive shaft in phase, meaning that the screw head is going in a line at the same angle of the other screw head. And then go ahead and put it onto our rear axle and screw it in. And our whole kit is assembled and finished, so we can go ahead and reinstall our wheels. And that's how to assemble the whole kit. Lastly, all you'll need to do is go ahead and glue on the magnets to your magnet mounts and the bottom of your body. This is one of the type of glues that I use when gluing things to my RC parts and 3D printed pieces. You can also use super glue. Sometimes the super glue off gases, and I don't really care for that too much. This doesn't really off gas like that, and it dries really clear. For the bottom of the body, what I ended up actually using is JB Weld Clear Epoxy. You're gonna want something that holds really well. Now, if you're wanting to know an easy way of how to get these magnets in line on the body, is actually a lot simpler than you'd think. The first thing you're gonna wanna do is go ahead and glue the magnets into your magnet mounts, let those go ahead and dry, and then move on to your body. Take your body, and then you're simply gonna take magnets on top of your body just like this, and then go ahead and take a piece of tape, put tape over the magnets here, and then these magnets will then be stuck to the top, holding these magnets into the inside of the hood with the magnets on the other side of the hood. And then from there, you can go ahead, add in all of your epoxy, glue everything down, let that dry overnight so that it's nice and cured. Then you can simply remove the magnets from the top of the hood and everything's aligned perfectly. And then finally, the last thing to note between the two different chassis types is there's the raised chassis, which you saw me install here on this truck, and the regular chassis. The regular chassis doesn't require any type of trimming and will simply line up to the bottom of the bed with the magnet mount and everything. The raised chassis will come up through the bed a little bit here, allowing you to get the shocks tucked up just a little bit taller if you're wanting to have that really low set with some double barrel shocks, or if you're using these big bore oil shocks like I am, you might want to have that higher shock option like I'm using at the very top, just so that you can get it to sit at a really nice spot. That pretty much wraps up everything on how to install and assemble the chassis kit for this F250 from Big Country Toys. If you guys have any other questions, go ahead and drop them down in the comments below. I'll try and answer them the best that I can. As well, you can go ahead and check the link in the description for the body and some of the other parts that I'm using on this truck. Thanks for watching and drive safe.